All right, so you're thinking about starting a podcast. That's so cool. I have to say it's exciting for sure, but I get it. It can be a little overwhelming too. Like, where do you even begin?
Yeah, there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle.
Exactly. But that's why we're doing these deep dives. We break it all down step by step and make it feel less overwhelming.
It's all about taking those first steps, even if they feel small.
Okay, so for this deep dive, we're looking at two awesome sources. First, we have a YouTube video by this podcaster, Safia. She lays out a really clear, I don't know, like a roadmap for launching a podcast.
She's great. Really practical advice.
Yeah, and then we also have this document. It's from this group GBN, and it is packed with marketing ideas.
What I found interesting is both Safia and GBN, they both really emphasize that you've got to be focused, like laser focused on finding your people.
Oh, totally, yeah. Finding your people.
Safia, she calls it your niche. GBN uses the word targeting.
It's all about knowing your audience, right? Figuring out exactly who you're talking to.
Exactly.
Okay, so imagine this. You're listening to your own podcast a year from now.
Oh, I love that.
What are people saying about it?
I like how you're thinking.
What kind of conversations are you sparking with your podcast?
You know, that's such a powerful question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Because it really gets to the core of why you're doing this whole thing in the first place.
It does, right.
And I think that's part of what Safia means when she talks about, having a clear purpose.
Yes. And you know what else she talks about that I think is really, really helpful?
What's that?
Content pillars. Have you heard this term before? Content pillars.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So for people who are like, what is a content pillar? It's basically just like figuring out those key subtopics within your niche, those like recurring themes that you're going to build your episodes around.
Right. And I think, sometimes people think of them as like the foundation of a house almost.
Oh, that's good. Like if your podcast was a house, those content pillars would be like the strong foundation it's built on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that not only does it give your listeners a really clear understanding of what they can expect from you. Totally. But it also makes your life as the podcaster so much easier because it helps you plan and it helps you stay consistent, which,
Well, and that's huge. Safia talks about it a lot. She is all about planning your content in advance.
Yeah.
She actually says it can be really easy, especially when you're first starting out, to feel super overwhelmed if you don't have some kind of, I don't know, like a roadmap to follow.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like anything else, if you have some sort of plan in place, even if it's loose.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It just makes everything feel so much more manageable.
Totally, because then you're not just staring at this like big scary thing.
It's like that whole thing, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
One bite at a time.
Exactly. You break it down into those little bites.
Small steps.
Okay, now I have a question for you. What's the thing that holds people back the most from actually hitting record on that first episode?
I mean, I think there's probably a lot, but fear.
Okay, yes. But there's like a practical one too.
Oh, the technical side of things.
Yes. They get so caught up in the gear and the tech.
100%.
And Safia had a really great quote about this. She was like, don't let gear be a barrier to entry. I wrote it down.
Oh, I love that.
Because at the end of the day, it's really about your voice and your ideas.
That's so true.
That's what people are tuning in for.
And you can always upgrade later.
Exactly. You can always improve the sound quality later, but you can't get back lost time.
Right.
And she actually gave some really good microphone recommendations for people who are just starting out and maybe don't want to spend a ton of money.
Which, by the way, you really don't have to.
No, you really don't. She recommended the Audio-Technica ATR 2100.
Solid choice.
The Shure SM58, that classic one.
Yeah, the one you see everywhere.
You might need an adapter for it. And then the Rode NT USB.
All great options.
And then there's the age-old question. To script or not to script?
Ooh, yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
So what does Safia say? Because I'm curious, what's her take?
Well, and this I thought was really interesting. She actually started out scripting her episodes word for word.
Really?
But then over time, she's kind of transitioned to a more flexible approach. So now she doesn't necessarily advocate one way or the other. She really emphasizes, like, figuring out what works best for you.
That's kind of refreshing, actually.
It is.
Because I feel like there's so much pressure sometimes to do it a certain way.
Right. You have to find your own flow, your own rhythm, what feels natural for you.
Because some people, they thrive on that, like, off the cuff, just riffing.
And then other people feel more comfortable having that script in front of them, like a safety net.
It's totally about honoring your own creative process.
100%.
Okay, so let's say we've got our content, we've got our setup, we kind of know what we're doing. What's the next step?
You've got to get it out into the world.
Get it out there.
Find a platform where people can listen.
What are those called?
Hosting platforms.
Right, hosting platforms. I knew there was a name for it. And there's so many to choose from these days, right?
There are. Safia mentioned Cast, which is a free option.
Yeah.
And then a paid option, Audio Means.
Oh, yeah.
But there are so many.
It can get kind of overwhelming, honestly.
It can, which is why it's important to do your research and look at what features are most important to you.
So look at the pricing, the analytics, all of that.
Yes, because some platforms offer more detailed data than others, so you really want to think about what's going to be the most valuable to you.
Okay, so just to recap what we've covered from Safia's video. Finding your niche, or should I say those content pillars. We've got planning your content in advance. We even touched on some tech tips.
Don't overcomplicate things.
Just get started.
Exactly. And that actually is the perfect transition to our second source.
Yeah,
because
we've covered a lot of ground with Safia's video, like the creative heart of your podcast. But what about getting it out there? Making sure people actually hear those awesome episodes you're creating.
That's where marketing comes in, right?
Exactly. And that's where our second source comes in, this document from a group called GBN.
And they are all about reaching a professional audience.
Yes. Which is perfect for our listeners, right? So many of you are interested in that world, whether it's for your career or just because you're curious about those industries.
And what's really cool is, you know how we were talking about finding your people?
Oh, yeah. With Safia, she called it finding your niche.
Right. So GBN, they use the term targeted marketing, but it's all the same idea. It's all about being really strategic and making sure that your podcast is seen by the people who are going to love it the most.
It's like you're not just throwing it out into the void and hoping for the best. You're actually being intentional about who you're trying to reach.
Exactly. And they give some really practical advice for this. Like, they suggest using platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram, but they don't just say, oh, post on social media. They tell you how to really leverage those platforms.
Okay, how so? Give me the juicy details.
Well, they talk about how you could target people based on, like, their industry, their job title, even their location. So if you're, say, based in Geneva and you're trying to reach people in Geneva, you can do that.
That's so smart. I feel like so much of the time I hear like, oh yeah, just build your social media following. But I'm like, where do I even begin?
Right. It can be really overwhelming. But GBN gives you the tools to actually do it, which is really cool.
Okay, what else did they have to say?
They had this other really interesting idea that I've never thought about before. They suggest maybe even like offering episodes or segments in different languages.
Oh, wow. That is interesting, especially in a place like Geneva where there are so many languages spoken.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because then you're making your content accessible to a much wider audience.
That's so smart. Okay, keep going. What else did this GBN group have to say?
Well, they were really big on collaboration, which I thought was interesting. They suggested partnering with companies that have internship programs.
Oh, that's smart.
Right? Because it's a great way to, like, connect with potential guests who are, experts in their field.
Yeah, especially for students or recent grads, people who are just getting started in their careers.
Exactly. And GBN even specifically mentioned interviewing department heads who have experience working with interns.
Which is such a good angle, because those are the people who really know what it takes to succeed in those industries.
Right. And they can speak to the skills and the experience that people need to break in.
Okay, GBN is on a roll. They've got some really good ideas. What else?
This one might seem obvious, but I think it's so important, and they really stressed it. Visuals. They said you've got to create short, attention-grabbing video clips from your podcast interviews and share them on social media.
I was just thinking that. People have such short attention spans these days.
It's true. You've got to grab their attention quickly.
And video is the perfect way to do that, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Think about it as like a little sneak peek of what your podcast is all about, just a little taste to get people hooked.
So it's like a trailer for a movie almost.
Yeah, exactly. And they have good advice for doing it well. Like they said, always add subtitles.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Not only because it makes your content accessible to a wider audience, people who maybe can't listen with the sound on or who are deaf or hard of hearing.
But even just for people who are scrolling through their feeds and there's a lot of noise around them.
Exactly. They can still see what's going on, and they might be more likely to stop and watch.
This is so helpful. I'm so glad we're doing this deep dive because I'm learning so much. What else? What else did they talk about?
They actually touched on something that I think a lot of people, they kind of gloss over, but GBN really highlighted the importance of it, SEO.
SEO. Okay, I have to admit, that's one of those things, it always sounds a little intimidating.
It does. It can feel like you need to be like a tech wizard or something.
Right, like some kind of secret code.
Exactly. But GBN, they actually do a really good job of breaking it down and making it seem less scary.
Okay, good. So tell me, what is SEO in a nutshell?
So basically, SEO is all about making it easy for people to find your podcast, when they're searching online.
Okay, so when they're using Google or whatever search engine they use.
Exactly. And one of the things they suggest is creating a blog alongside your podcast.
Okay, so like in addition to your actual podcast episode.
Right. And in your blog posts, you can like summarize each episode. You sprinkle in these things called keywords, which we can talk about in a second, and then you link back to your episode.
Okay, hold on. Rewind a bit. Keywords, what are those?
Oh, right, yeah. Keywords are basically just those like magic words that are going to connect people who are searching for specific content with, well, your content.
So they're the words that people are actually typing in.
Exactly. So let's say, for example, your podcast is all about like starting a business in the food industry.
Okay, I like it. Food business podcast.
So some relevant keywords might be like food business, entrepreneur, maybe restaurant startup, things like that.
Got it. So by using those keywords in my blog posts, I'm basically like giving Google a heads up about what my podcast is about.
Yes, exactly. It's like those, you see articles online and they have all those little tags.
Yes.
It's like that. It's making it really clear what you're going to get when you click.
And then by linking to the episodes, I'm making it super easy for them to actually find and listen.
Exactly. You're creating that like direct path from their curious Google search to your amazing podcast.
I love it. I'm sold. SEO, you're not so scary after all.
No, not at all.
It's interesting thinking about all of this. It really does reinforce what both Safia and GBN have said.
Huh?
You have to treat your podcast like a business.
100%.
Which I know can be kind of a buzzkill for some people.
Right. Because we want to be creative.
Yes. But at the end of the day, if you want to create something sustainable, you want to create something that you can keep doing and keep pouring your heart into.
You've got to have that solid foundation.
Exactly. And that includes the business side of things. Speaking of which, did GBN have any tips on actually making money from a podcast?
They did. They mentioned exploring things like sponsored content and cross-promotion.
Oh, right. Like how some podcasts will have ads.
Exactly. Or they'll partner with brands.
Which, you know what? It makes total sense.
It does.
Because you're providing value.
Right. You're offering something valuable to your listeners, and brands, they recognize that.
And they're willing to pay to get in front of your audience.
Exactly. And GBN actually connected this back to, everything else we've been talking about, like having a clearly defined niche, having a strong content strategy, that targeted marketing plan. All of that makes you way more appealing to potential sponsors.
Because you know who your audience is.
Exactly.
And you know how to reach them.
Right. So you can say to a sponsor, hey, this is who listens to my show, and they know that their message is going to resonate.
Okay, that is huge. I'm so glad we talked about this. My biggest takeaway from both of these sources is just get started.
Yes, 100%.
It's so easy to get bogged down in the details and to feel like everything has to be perfect before you hit publish on anything.
Right. But you don't have to have all the answers right away.
No. And honestly, you're going to learn so much more by actually doing it, by making those mistakes, by figuring out what works.
It's all part of the process.
It is. And sometimes those mistakes or those detours, they lead to the best discoveries.
Totally. So embrace the journey, be open to learning, and just go for it.
So good. All right, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's resonating most with you? What's got those podcasting gears turning?
Honestly, what sticks with me is just how important it is to find your people and then make it easy for them to find you.
Yeah.
And not be afraid to experiment and evolve along the way.
I love that. So good. Well, there you have it. Those are some serious podcasting gems to get you started. And hey, if you're feeling inspired, don't wait. Start brainstorming. Grab that microphone and start creating. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.